to do this. It's always like opening the doors to the store and letting people come in. So hello, everybody, as you're joining in with us. Thanks for joining. Thanks for coming in. While we give everybody a chance to get settled in, just welcome Katherine. Rachel just, I was going to say stormed in, pun intended.
I was nervous. I'm never late for things. And I was like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah.
no, it worked out. Yay.
It worked
and you're
out.
still not like
and you're still not late. She was caught in a hailstorm, which is, I guess, unusual for up in Toronto. So
yeah.
So as you guys, many of you who are here with us know that Rachel comes in and joins us for these wonderful interviews that she does. We could not do all of this without you. So thank you, Rachel. As you know, she's joining us from Toronto, correct?
Yeah.
And Katherine, you're actually not where you live, because where do you live and where are you joining us from?
Yeah, I live outside Chicago and I'm joining you from Florida. I am on tour for the Berlin Letters, and tonight I'm staying at my parents' home. They live in Florida, so that's super fun.
And you can tell because Katherine's office always has pictures of elephants on the wall. So
this is so true.
There are Katherine's home.
Yeah. There are no elephants.
There's no elephants, so she's not at home. Elephants are her thing.
No elephants. No elephants. We're in the Chicago area.
We are now in Lake Forest, which is north of the city, about 45 minutes north of the city.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we're here today to have another wonderful conversation. So I will do my due diligence and introduce these ladies in just a couple of seconds. But for those of you that are joining us live on the webinar, if you're watching this later, there's no live going on, but I'll still put a link for you to be able to order the book from Warwick's. In the comment section, I'm going to put how to order Katherine's book from us, and we can ship that anywhere in the US. Sorry, we can't ship it internationally. We haven't quite gotten that done yet, but we will do anywhere in the US. And then also in that comment section, or actually not in the comment section, if you scroll down over the Q&A button is where you're going to put any questions. Rachel and Katherine are going to talk for about 30-ish minutes, and then you can put some questions in that Q&A box, and I'll pop on and start and bring those to them when we're all ready to do the Q&A portion of this. So with that, let me introduce these wonderful ladies, and we'll get on with the conversation. So Katherine Reay, is it Reay?
Right, it's right.
Okay. I should have asked that earlier. Is a national best-selling and award-winning author who has enjoyed a lifelong affair with books, as I think all of us here have. She publishes both fiction and nonfiction, holds a BA and MS from Northwestern University, and like she said, currently lives outside the Chicago area with her husband and 3 children. And like we said, she's here to talk about her new book, The Berlin Letters. And joining her is our favorite interviewer, author, all-around great book enthusiast, Rachel McMillan. Oh, thank you for showing your cover of the book. It's such a good cover. Rachel
is a great cover.
It is a great cover. Rachel is the author of The London Restoration, The Mozart Code, The Herringford and Watts Mysteries, The Van Buren and DeLuca Mysteries, and the 3/4 Time series of contemporary Viennese romances. She's also author of Dream Plan Go, a travel guide to inspire independent adventure. And she's got some new things coming that we're going to talk about a little bit later too. So ladies, have a great conversation. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks so much, Julie. And thanks, Katherine. Oh my gosh, it's so fun to see you.
It's so fun to see you.
It's always fun to see Katherine. I have been a fan of Katherine since I got an advanced copy of her very first novel called Dear Mr. Knightley. Which published in, was it 2014? Are we at 10 years yet?
2013. It's 11 years this year.
Oh,
isn't
my
that crazy?
God.
Yeah.
And I have read every one of Katherine's novels, many of them more than once, because I'm a longtime fan. And one of the amazing things about Katherine is that she is, and I'm quite cognizant that some readers might be catching up with Katherine in this phase of her career where she's doing these amazing historical novels like The London House, Shadow in Moscow. It's been a while. What's the Moscow book? I'm such a professional.
Shadow in Moscow.
Shadow in Moscow, and the Berlin Letters. That you should all know that if you're just discovering Katherine right now, you are very fortunate because you have an entire backlist to catch up on. And she writes, hey, Brenda, British Columbia, Canada, hurrah. Everything that Katherine writes is driven by amazing character pieces, intense and immense research, and a love for books and stories. So if you're just finding Katherine now because she's on tour, or these books covers are just catching your eye on on Instagram or what have you, TikTok, please know that you're in the fortunate position of going back and reading through everything she has ever written, which is amazing. And I read Dear Mr. Knightley every year come fall,
You are
when
so
a
sweet.
bunch of you, hi San Diego, when a bunch of you are starting to rewatch the Gilmore Girls, my fall is always started by a reread of Dear Mr. Knightley. So
Oh my
Katherine,
goodness. I need that on my marketing. Gilmore Girls and Dear Mr. Knightley.
they just have
There
the
we go.
same kind of feel, the cozy vibe that we're all looking for, no matter what time of year it is. Katherine, one of the things that I love about you and something that we share is you always travel for research. And like myself, you enjoy exploring the places that you're writing about. Tell us about Berlin, stepping into the world of the Wall, Checkpoint Charlie. Was there anything about the city when you viewed it through the lens of this particular project that surprised you?
You can do so much with books and research and talking to people, but until you get feet on the ground, you don't know the pace of a city, the true
Everyone write this
feel,
down. Face
the
of a
way it's
city.
building, and the way the buildings feel, like the tactile texture of a city. And I think that is what surprised me the most. I've lived in London, and London was horribly, as you know, bombed during World War II. Well, you can look down a London street and you can see the new buildings. You're like, that's 1950s, that's 1960s. In East Berlin, a lot of those buildings have not been replaced. There are
Wow.
open courtyards, and of the sections of the buildings that are still there, there are doorways still 4, 5, 6 stories up that would have gone into apartments. And I never would have known that if I hadn't been in the city. And they're in the book because they're almost sad. They're like doors to nowhere. And it's those little details that made this story come alive for me. And just chasing down the streets that Louisa would have run in that final night before the wall fell, etc. And then another thing, from Google Maps, I could tell that Karl Marx Allee leads right into the Fensterturm, that iconic television tower, in the center of the
Yeah, yeah.
Alexanderplatz in Berlin. But until you're there, you don't realize this huge, like this is empire stuff, the Soviet architecture that lines that street. You just feel the magnitude of it, and you don't get that from maps. So I agree with you. Feet on the ground is so important, and I love it. I love what it brings to a story every single time.
And Katherine and I share a city. Readers
There
of
I
mine
go.
know
Yep, yep, yep.
that Vienna is my muse. And Vienna is a city where you see a patchwork quilt of all of the different occupations and all of an empire kind of felled by its occupation by the Soviets, who built a lot of the architecture. And it's amazing what you do with this city. The city becomes an entire character. Jensen Beach, Florida is here, loves your books. Yeah, who doesn't? And Mary from La Jolla, but normally lives in Chicago in the Wicker Park, Bucktown area. So Katherine,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have friends.
Love that
Yay.
area.
Um,
Friends, this is awesome.
you have friends. And what I
Friends.
enjoy about your books than everyone, Katherine didn't start writing historical fiction. I would say that she wrote contemporary fiction that always had a literary flair, because the Bronte plot, the Austen escape, You are so rooted in historical stories. And now, with your last 3 books and the upcoming books you're doing, you have an opportunity to meld these two passions and fuse them. And you enjoy interweaving a contemporary frame with a historical. In Shadow in Moscow, we've got 1954 Vienna and 1980. In Berlin Letters, we start in the early 60s, we go back and forth with 1989. How do you ground yourself in the past when you have such a strong, more contemporary voice? I mean, it pains me to look at 1989 as historical, because it makes us all feel ancient, but it is historical. How do you make sure that you get in the mindset for 2 different time periods?
Yeah. And that does start with a lot of research, a lot of reading. And I not only do reading in nonfiction at that time, I actually read a ton of fiction of the time, books that were published at that time, contemporary novels published during those time periods, because that lets me know how people were thinking within those space, within the fiction space. And so you're right, it is world building, and I try to keep very focused. In fact, with the Berlin Letters, which ends on November 9th, 1989, the night the wall falls, I made sure not to read anything past that night. And so somebody, is talking about the reunification of Germany, began in 1991, and I'm like, nope. I know I can tell you so much about those 28 years of the wall, but I didn't research that, because then I would bring in presumed knowledge. And so when I'm writing a story, I try to stay really focused on the time period and the culture in which these characters live, and sort of put on blinders to everything else but that moment in history. The music, the food, the dress, the Soviet occupation, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so everybody, I have met Katherine several times in real life, and we've hung out, so we're actually friends. And I've met her online, but every time I talk to you, I fall deeply artistically in love because you just are everything that I seek out in a historical or even contemporary experience of writing. Like, oh, Katherine, you're so good. And why is it, do you think, because you're not the only person who's bringing history into the present through the frame, as we would say, of a dual time narrative, where you've got 2 different time periods? Why do you think this particular means of storytelling has found such resonance with readers? Because we see it all the time. Natasha Lester does it, Kate Quinn does it. Every basically, who am I thinking of who wrote? Basically everybody does this.
Everybody.
Where you start.
Name someone who's not doing it. I think there are a couple reasons. Number one, I think you do get 2 stories within one. You know what I mean? And who doesn't love that?
Yeah.
But number 2, if it is well done, there is a synergy, and I truly believe that is better than 2 stories. I think it makes 3 stories. Like if you make those tight and they talk to each other, it is like a magnified experience, and that is what I'm really enjoying. So in the Berlin Letters, you do follow Louisa Vogler. She is the main character, and she lives in the story within the first week of November 1989. But her father lives within the story from the day the wall goes up in 1961 to the night it comes down in 89. But each thing that they are going through in these different time periods are emotionally linked. They physically are very different experiences, but if you read closely, they are often going through the same emotional turmoil simultaneously, which is linking them across time and space, and I think giving a really rich reader experience. And I think that is what a well-done split time novel can do. It augments the book.
I was
That makes
thinking of
sense.
Kate Morton. Kate Morton is someone who I just respect
Yes, she does it
for, yeah.
beautifully.
Oh, it's incredible the way that we are able to find ourselves in history, especially in a time period where I feel that we're living history. We do not know right now how 2014, how the years since, I'm going to say, the pandemic started in 2020, 4 years ago, are going to be impressed on the generations after us, because there's so much going on in the world. And I feel that right now there's a particular fascination with more recent history. Look at the popularity of the film Oppenheimer, which is not that old, but is really drawing people to think about what major things happened that are now living outside of the textbook experience I had when I was learning about dates. It's almost like we've turned our brains on to what's happening in the world that is a repeat of what's happened before. And you find the emotional resonance that allows us to live within these moments. Oh gosh, you're so good at your job. One thing many readers who have discovered you within the context of your recent historicals may not realize is that you began with your debut with, as I mentioned, Dear Mr. Knightley, which is told in an epistolary fashion, which means it's told through letters. It's an homage to Gene Webster's Daddy Long Legs, and you get to know a character through letters. And it's something that few authors could pull off, but Katherine Reay is a special person. So she does it so well. And now you're back to letters. Was that exciting for you to be able to find the crux of a story through this medium?
I have returned to letters prior to the Berlin letters too,
Oh
with
yeah,
the London
London House. London House is
House.
all about the letters.
All about the letters. And I got to tell you, Rachel, I love writing letters. It is a super enhanced POV, and I adore it. And one of the reasons I
POV, point of
adore it
view,
is
for
many reasons I
people
adore
who
it.
don't know.
But oh, yep, sorry. POV, point of view, and it, it's a way the character's point of view, but it's also a way to expose the character, because when you're writing in letters, you are writing on multiple levels. What that person wants the reader to get from it, what the writer is trying to hide, what the writer is even trying to convince themselves isn't real or didn't happen, when he or she will write the facts that it did, but they try to downplay it. So you can tell when this character is trying to hide something, reveal something, lie to themselves, lie to another. It's like a magnified perspective on their inner world. And I love writing in letters. And when I do write in letters, I handwrite them out first, because that is a much more emotional experience. So every time you come to a letter in the Berlin letters, not only have I handwritten it, but I've also made up all the codes, because AI did not exist in 1989 or 1961. So I taught myself, how to do acrostic ciphers and shift ciphers, and made up all the codes, which was so much fun. So there you go.
I like that you say so much fun, because when I tried to do the codes in chess, which I tried to do what's her code, it nearly killed
Oh my
me.
gosh, I
And
remember.
my
I
editor.
remember. Yes.
I love that you're like, this was
The
fun.
Mozart
And my
code.
right wing brain was like, this is horrible. Get me out of this. Why did I do this? I just love, because there's an intimacy to letters and to the Berlin letters, especially, where you as a reader feel that you're peeking into a relationship, you're peeking into the vulnerability of people, and you're being given an extra special glimpse into two very different lives. And I think that that connects you with a reader in a wonderful way. And you are so, sorry, this is now just a Katherine Reay me fangirling over her, but this is not new to anyone who has seen me fangirl over Katherine in interviews before. But you really excel at bridging the gap between the reader and the characters, and the letters enable us to connect with you in such an amazing way. But it's not just letters, your books, and I envy you in a healthy way, not in a mean way, just in a, oh my gosh, she's so good way, is your books are always exceptionally paced. So do you outline, or do you allow yourself to follow bunny trails into a hole somewhere until you find the perfect balance?
You know, that's interesting. I am not wired for too many off-road adventures. I think very logically. That said, I don't outline well. You know what I mean? I do let the characters speak. So it's a kind of a hybrid answer. Yes, I keep them on the road, but I let them weave from side to side. And so they really do come to life for me. And so they are character-driven stories, but perhaps that pacing comes in because I really do know where I need them to be. Before I start a novel, I always have the vision emotionally and physically what I believe that final scene will be. For some reason, that is what I see first. So I always, in a way, have that true north in front of me where I'm headed, and I don't veer anything that's going to take me from hitting that true north. And that is an odd thing, to not necessarily know where you begin, but I always know where I'm going to end.
And then you can just move back from that because everything feeds into that final moment. And
yes,
this one especially is just such a stunner. I mean, we've talked about the cover. I actually don't have a physical copy yet. I read it digitally.
Wait, how do you not have it?
It will come. It will come, believe. Believe, as Ted Lasso would say. It just hasn't shown up yet.
The cover, which is,
but the cover is
I believe,
stunning. And the title is stunning. And Katherine and I know each other well enough that for many years, Katherine and I brainstorm about her titles.
Wait, you came up with my titles?
Not this one though. This one's fantastic.
I think you came up with both the Austen escape and the Bronte plot titles.
I definitely contributed because I love Katherine so much. Yeah, this is just a fangirl experience for everyone watching. But isn't that amazing? I think that it's really wonderful when people can connect with their favorite authors. And that's why I love events like this, because you get an opportunity to see Katherine, even if you are not in the geographical region of somewhere where she's on tour. Warwick's allows us to be able to have this access. So you can fangirl Katherine too. She's the most accessible person in the world, and I'm a huge fan of hers. So this is so fun for me. And what I'm noticing right now is that the Cold War more and more is becoming prevalent in fiction, and people are developing a real fascination in reading about it, perhaps because in a way, there's with Oppenheimer, with the media, with the news, we're learning that we're not too far away from a world that is potentially as bleak in ways as the Cold War was, and the people who lived through it were experiencing. Was there any little known fact about this period that you learned in research that perhaps you didn't know before?
Oh my goodness, so much. And that's the thing about the Cold War, is because these two superpowers never went head to head, there were shadows and side skirmishes for most of the 20th century. And so digging into those is unbelievably revealing. There are two incidents, and I don't even know if I should say them because I put them in the book because they were so mind-blowing, that are absolutely true. And we in the United States don't really know about them. And yes, there was actually
how close people
so
came.
much. And especially when you can. Yes, exactly. How close people came in both those incidences. So yeah, it's an incredible, I mean, if you think about it, 1945 to 1991, if one says it ended in 91, you've got this span of history that there is never a day without intrigue. There is always something between these two. And Berlin was the epicenter of it. And not to be crude here, but I'm going to say it. In 1963, Nikita Khrushchev, who was head of the Soviet Union, said, "Berlin is the testicle of the West. When I want the West to scream, I squeeze Berlin." And that is what Berlin was. Berlin was ground zero for Cold War tensions. So there's so much about that city within this time period that is really rich in history, very, sad to read. I mean, that wall destroyed families, but it really is a rich time to read and study, examine, and kind of understand. And it's really interesting when you do that and you emotionally attach it to one family. Then it's history that comes to life.
Because you zone in. And I have to give a shout out to my friend, a fellow Torontonian, Bryn Turnbull, whose Berlin apartment releases later this year and is a wonderful counterpart to
I
Berlin
know.
Letters, because that again focuses on a couple who fall in love, are married, and separated by the wall. And sometimes I feel we look at the wall as a metaphor, but it was also this actual physical, tangible thing.
Physical wall.
Yeah.
That went up in a single night. So it was unexpected, to say the least.
And Katherine is the perfect author to explore this with, because she geeks out, for lack of a better term, about history and everything she writes. So you will, by symbiosis, inherit some of that passion that she has. How I'm going to skip that because we're at 7:27, and I want to make sure if anyone's watching that they have time for questions. And we know that this Cold War is super popular right now. It's resonating, but I would like to move on to talking a little bit. First off, everyone, please look up Katherine's backlist. Right now, we're living in an age where publishing is very super centered on stories about books and bookstores throughout history, throughout communities. In many ways, Katherine has been on that trend a decade before it's become part of the popular publishing consciousness. So go back and read.
Too early.
You were too early, Katherine. Just too early, but
too early.
It's not too late.
So true. They're all there.
They're all there. And what I love is that even as you, with London House and Shadow in Moscow and Berlin Letters, are exploring a contemporary frame or a more contemporary frame with a historical moment, you are still infusing all of what I call the hallmarks of your fiction, in that they're deep character pieces and they are infused by a love of words and knowledge, and in this moment, how words can cross time to help us better understand the past. And I think it's just amazing what you've done here. But I really want to ask you, and this is something I've left off asking Katherine in like an email or a text, where did you stumble upon the idea for your next book? It's popular knowledge now. It's been in Publishers Marketplace. It's got a bit of a caper vibe. You've written about art and art history before in, oh my gosh, I am blanking. Emily, I call it Emily in my head. Portrait of Emily Price. So you're in your wheelhouse again, but you're writing a new book that is about forgery, the 1970s, has a bit of a, for readers watching, a How to Steal a Million with Audrey Hepburn and Peter O'Toole vibe. Where did you stumble on that idea? Has it been percolating in your head for a while, or was it something that you were focused on finding?
No, it had not been percolating in my head. What happened is I love this touch of suspense that the Cold War and spy novels have given me, but I wanted
She
to
reads
kind of
so
go
many
adjacent.
spy novels. Oh my gosh. Yes.
So many spy novels, and I have loved it. But I wanted to go a little bit adjacent. Um, I wanted actually, you bring up A Portrait of Emily Price. I wanted to write a book that had a little bit more of that beauty, that dip into literature, that dip into art more. And so I came across a forgery couple, and I'm not going to tell their name yet because that would tell you the story. A forgery couple, and once I read about them, I was like, oh my goodness, I see it. Now they are not the protagonists, obviously they're the forgers, but I saw the story in my head as soon as I came across their story. And so it really was, it was that suspense, but yet that bit of a caper and that beauty of art and that whole sort of wonderful atmosphere that surrounds it. And that's kind of, I just wanted to go, it's almost like that bridge between spies and literature. I'm landing in
Yep.
art.
And that's why everybody, again, sorry, I know you know her. I'm going to shout out to Bryn Turnbull again, because Paris Deception is the same thing about forgeries in World War II in Paris. And I always have to shout out to another Torontonian. Before we get to reader
Absolutely.
questions, there is one last question for you, Katherine, and it is about 2 books. The one book from your backlist that every reader should read to get to know you, and the one book you've read that you feel opens a door into understanding Katherine. One of yours and one of someone else's.
Okay, so that is so tough. That's a tough
right?
question.
Sorry.
That's a good question. No. Well, but you know what? Okay, so here's I hate to do a yes and they both have letters, but I would say if you want to know my heart, you read Dear Mr. Knightley. If you want to know my heart and my mature sort of growing as a writer, couple that with The London House.
Yeah.
And they both have a lot of letters. So I think that's where I'd land on that question. For the other, that's an interesting one, because then you would actually have to read you'd have to read Persuasion. That's my favorite Jane Austen. I adore Jane Austen.
Till We Have
And then
Faces.
you probably, yes, I was going to say, you'd have to read Till We Have Faces, and then you might also have to read like The Horse and His Boy.
These are all by
Narnia.
C.S.
I think
Lewis,
that was
by
the
the
fourth
way.
one.
Persuasion by Jane Austen.
Those are by C.S. Lewis. So you got to read a Jane Austen. Yep, you got to read a Jane Austen and a couple C.S. Lewis. And then you might need to throw in like The Great Brain, which was my favorite book in the 4th grade. So yeah, that I think.
So good.
Great. I've never been asked that. That is a fabulous question.
I've never asked that before, but it's you, Katherine. So I was like, gonna fangirl to the skies here.
It is so good.
Such a good question.
So good.
Such a good question, because
such a good question.
It just like and especially to be on the spot, Katherine. Bravo to you to come up with that on the spot.
I knew she could do it.
Yep, that's a tough one. We've got some great questions coming in, so I will get right to them. And another great interview, Rachel. Thank you. Love how you bring out the best in the authors that you talk with. So thank you. So Mary, I'm going to read her question that's coming in for the chat. She said she can't wait to read Berlin Letters, but she wants to know what attracted you to this topic and the character.
Okay, a little bit of twofold. The topic I stumbled into when I was writing The London House, that really examines the women of the SOE, the Britain's Special Operations Executive, and the French resistance and what they did. And then I wondered, okay, fabulous women, what did you do next? And Virginia Hall, for instance, came back to the United States and worked for the CIA. So that landed me in the Cold War. And that A Shadow in Moscow kind of came out from that. A CIA woman who works for the CIA, one who works for MI6. And then as I was researching everything for Shadow in Moscow, you come across the iconic symbol of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall. And two things intrigued me about the wall in a literary kind of way. Number one, could it be a structure of a novel? Have the wall be the structure of the novel. And the novel does begin the day the wall goes up and it ends the day the wall falls. But then also have it be a character in the novel. Take something physical and show how it changes over time and show how it impacts people over time. And that was intriguing to me. And then I came across the Venona Project, which was a CIA code-breaking project from 1943 all the way to 1980. And I thought to myself, well, what if somebody in the CIA said, hey, there is still value in those old codes? What would it mean to keep digging into those old World War II and early Cold War codes? And that led me to Louisa, who's the main character, because she's not looking at codes that are shooting around the globe today. She's examining World War II codes. And that's when she stumbles upon a memory and we enter into the story. So there's so much that came together, but it was just sort of this confluence of neat things that sort of mixed, and all of a sudden I had the full idea.
Isn't
And
that
that's
so
a
fun
really
though?
long-winded
You want to read about Virginia Hall? Erica Roebuck wrote an amazing novel about her called The Invisible Woman. And I would read that and Sisters of Night and Fog to get an idea of the SOE. And I just, because I couldn't type it fast enough, put a link in for Warwick's did an event with Erica, and you can see the cover and find it.
Oh, good. And then also from Warwick's, grab A Woman of No Importance by
Yes, the
Sonia Purnell.
true story. I just gave that to my dad.
These nonfiction, the story. I mean, amazing stuff. So yeah,
Oh, I
anyway,
love
amazing
it.
woman.
Yeah, Mary says
Yeah.
she loves she loves this idea. It's amazing. Isn't it so fun when all this stuff just comes together and it's just like there's the story. And I love that all you authors are able to do that, because we as readers, not writers, love that so much. She remembers exactly where she was when the Berlin Wall fell and who she was with. And I have no idea why that was planted in my brain. She's very excited to read this. Okay, so Lisa has a kind of a twofold question. I'm going to start with her second question first, I think, because it relates a little bit more. She wants to know, do you have all your research done before you start writing the manuscript, talking about all the ideas, but is your research done, or are you learning as you go?
It's a little bit of both. I have to know the world as well as I can before I can put the characters into it. So therefore, there is months of research without writing a single word. And I don't have a notebook in front of me, but a notebook like a moleskin, not unlike an actual book. I do all my research in a notebook. It is not tabbed, it is not organized, it is an absolute mess. But what that means is every time I need to find some little detail, I got to page through that entire notebook to find it. And so all of that information gets in the soup of the story over and over and over, so it can come out organically. So once I know the world, I can begin the story, but the research never ends. It really doesn't, because I truly believe I'm not that creative and the world is far more interesting than my head. And seriously, some of that Cold War stuff I could not make up.
No.
So
it is so true.
So if I can put something real in, I'll put something real in. Yeah. So the research goes on and on and on.
I love it. Yeah, because truth is stranger than fiction. And it is, and that particular time period.
So much stranger than fiction.
And that particular time period, and that's when I grew up. I grew up in the late 60s through the 70s. The Cold War was very visceral in our lives. And so it was, and we think things are like bad now, but stuff was pretty bad back then. It was a little crazy what was going on back then. All right. So Lisa's second part to her question is, do you edit as you go, or do you complete the first draft in its entirety before editing?
That's a really good question. I edit as I go, because what I do is I basically run the tide up the beach. I start at the base of a wave and that's the beginning of the manuscript, and I will run it as far as I can before I feel the threads are fraying and my foundation isn't solid. And then I go back. I start from the very first word, I edit and I write and I run the tide all the way up the beach as far as I can go again. So by the time I hand a manuscript in, those early chapters may have seen 6, 7, 8 revisions, whereas the final, that scene that I told you I'd know from the very beginning, that final one may have only seen 1 or 2, but it's pretty clean because it's on such a strong foundation. So I do not edit and write simultaneously. Like, the brain can't do that. Totally creativity stifling. But I do go back and run the tide up the beach. And that's how I write a book.
Fascinating. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to ask both of you this question because I think, Rachel, you got to it a little bit, but in a way, but anything current, I want to know what you're reading currently and who you'd want to elevate. So Rachel, you want to start that one?
Oh gosh, I have to tell you, so much of my life right now is research for my own books.
Oh.
I've got 4 concurrently going, and I think
Well, tell us about those.
well, Warwick knows that in my day job I'm a literary agent, right? So that means that I'm always reading client manuscripts. But for endorsement, and I can't remember the title, so I suck at life, but I'm reading Maddie Dawson's new one. And I love her book so much. Matchmaking for Beginners became such a balm for me during the pandemic. So it's quite an honor to be asked to give a blurb. I'm also reading The Briar Club by my friend Kate Quinn, which comes out in the summer, and it's 1950s and set in a boarding house in Washington during the McCarthy era. So we do get the flavor of the Cold War. And those are the 2 that are going on right now. And I'm always just trying to find the next book that's going to make me feel romantic and happy. So I'm finally reading Fourth Wing, which everybody's read before.
Yeah.
But as far as my own concurrent, I've just turned in a round of edits for The Liberty Scarf, which is coming out soon with Harper Muse. And it's me and Janelle Sazelski and Amy Runyon.
We just had Amy
saw
last
yesterday.
Yeah,
with Christy Woodson Harvey.
So fun.
And that is a story about a Liberty of London scarf that is part of the lives of 3 different women in World War I on the European front. I'm in another round of edits for Operation Scarlet, which is my retelling of the Scarlet Pimpernel story in World War II. And that
one of my favorite books ever.
A few, yes, we've talked about this. That one, we're not sure on the release date yet, but it's coming. And again, Julie, you've heard about my top secret project for 2025 for HarperCollins, which I can't talk about yet. And then the other book I have going, which is why I'm reading so many nonfiction, is I have a biography of Sir Christopher Wren due to a UK publisher in the summer. And that project came about because this editor read my book called The London Restoration, wherein I just infused in a historical novel all of my passion for the Christopher Wren churches in London and their rebuildings. So I've got so much. So I don't
know how. When do you sleep?
I don't.
I know. I don't think she sleeps.
I don't have the discretionary reading time that I usually enjoy. I will say that one of my most anticipated reads of the year is the new Deborah Harkness book. I'm a huge fan of Discovery of Witches. I love those books to pieces, and I cannot wait for the new one. But Katherine Reay is always someone I seek out, and I cannot ever wait for her new book. So, Katherine, I love you.
Don't say anything, but I think we get to host Deborah. Maybe you need to make a trip to San Diego.
I would lose my mind. I would probably
That's
faint.
awesome.
I know. So Katherine, anybody you want to lift up? Who's a book that you've been reading recently that you just loved?
So I was invited to blurb Madeline Martin's new book. That's the Book Lovers Library. I don't even know when it's coming out, but yes.
Yeah.
And I loved it. So I'm really excited about that one. I also am now, I was just on a panel at the Tucson Book Festival with Jean Kwok, and I'm reading The Leftover Woman, and I loved her Girl in Translation. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm digging into that one. I'm trying to think. I've been reading a lot of, Rachel's right. I've been reading a lot of spy novels lately, and I'm trying to actually read more art. I just finished The Art Thief, which was
So
it's
good.
nonfiction.
But
I
reads
loved
like,
it. It reads like fiction. I
It's
love
so
that one.
good. I mean,
so good.
Yeah.
he told, it reads like fiction. The pacing was so wonderful. So I literally just finished that today. So I'm gonna, dig back in. Oh, and I just finished The Feather Thief also,
That's
which
another
was
great,
really interesting.
really good nonfiction.
It was about a guy who stole feathers from another
And
really
who
good
would
nonfiction.
think that that would
So
be
I need to
so
read more
interesting
fiction.
to read about? It was really good.
Exactly. Birds,
And
stealing
feathers. And he's
feathers
stealing
from
feathers.
birds. But it was fascinating.
It was fascinating.
He's stealing feathers.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars of feathers.
Millions of dollars of
Yeah.
feathers.
So both of those were so, I know. Both of those were fantastic. So I really am having a lot of fun with my research. So it's sort of like, what am I reading? Well, I'm reading this for research, but it's so darn fun that
But
it's
it's
sort of
so
like my new
fun.
genre at the
So
moment.
fun.
And we're such nerds.
So
I have to
we're
tell
we're
you,
such-
I need to tell you two one that
We're
I
the
have
cool
to-
kids.
that I just finished. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Have you, either of you heard of The Square of Sevens by, oh my gosh. So it's set in Georgian England. And
that's
No.
my jam.
oh, it's such your jam. And it is this girl who is a fortune teller. Let's see, it's by Laura Shepard Robinson. It's A Square of Sevens.
Oh, I've read some of hers.
Oh.
She's a fabulous author.
Fabulous author. This book
I don't know
was
this book.
Immersive.
oh my god, this book was so great. So it's got, the little girl who's orphaned but has this codicil that they're looking for, and she tells fortunes with those cards, which are the Square of Seven. So it's got this like, it is so good. I just finished it
She
today,
owns that period. Yeah. Okay. I'm
And-
gonna find that.
find that. It's really, talk about a book that'll just take you down that you won't be reading anything else for a while. It was really good. So anyways, all right, that's our
I
fun.
love it. The book sucks you in and absorbs you. It's fabulous.
So good. And I love that time period too. So it was really good. All right, Rachel, for people who want to follow more about you're sending them to, I know X is the thing.
I love Twitter. I love X. I love Instagram because I share what I'm reading. I'm always Rach K. Mick, RACHKMC. And I think I'll be back with Warwick's to interview Piper Hughley in April. I think that's our next one, Julie.
Our next one's in April.
We've got so many this year.
I know.
But that's the next one.
I know. It's so good. I love all of them. And Katherine, for you, where do you like to send people to follow you around?
Really, I'm mostly on Instagram. I mean, that is all me. I answer all of the comments and stuff. I am trying to get on X a little more, but I'm more comfortable on Instagram. I just tend to, like, when I open up my phone, that's where I tend to go. And as I said, it's all me, so I will reply to you. I'm also on Facebook less often, I guess Instagram. If you also reach out to me on my website, I will reply. I got that from C.S. Lewis. He replied to every letter.
I love that.
You're so accessible. You put up with my fangirling.
Yes, I really am. It's all me in all
years.
those places. A little dorky, but
well, and I think it's true though. I think that people need to pick what they're comfortable using. Everybody's even for the bookstores. I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, you got to be on all this stuff." If you're not comfortable using it, it's not authentic, and it's not.
Apparently in America, TikTok, which was the thing, might be going through a moment right now. So you can never trust
a little moment.
So don't put
what is happening.
Right.
Don't put all your eggs in that basket.
Maybe that cautionary tale is don't put your eggs all in one basket. So.
Yeah, so true.
Well, Katherine, best of luck and continued success with the Berlin Letters. Just love that. Hope to have you back again for your next book. And Rachel, as always, wonderful seeing you. I'll see you with Piper next month.
Nice to see you too, Julie.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good evening.
Good night.